Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Katie Varman. As a dermatologist, I get a lot of questions about sunscreen, so I thought I would take a few minutes to talk about some of the basics of sunscreen and address some of the concerns about sunscreen and go over my recommendations. So in general, sunscreen is just one way that we can protect our skin from the damaging effects of sunlight. Sunscreen, of course, sits on the outside of the skin and either blocks or absorbs sunlight. While we also have a lot of different supplements as well as nutritional recommendations that can help protect your skin from the inside. But that's a discussion for another time. So just as a quick review, the sunlight is, of course, a spectrum, and ultraviolet light is something that gains a lot of attention because we know it causes burning and aging of the skin. But we're learning more and more about visible light as well because it can actually cause brown spots or hyperpigmentation and photoaging as well, especially when we're talking about some of our devices that can, emit a lot of blue light. The different spectrums of sunlight all have different what we call chromophores, so different structures in the skin that will absorb them, and then they penetrate to different lengths, or excuse me, to different depths. So ultraviolet B only penetrates into the top layer of the skin. Ultraviolet A goes deeper into the dermis where it can cause a ton of what we call oxidative stress, damaging the different important structures like collagen and elastic fibers, which are important for photoaging. And then as we get into the visible lights, it gets kind of deeper and deeper into the skin, into the dermis, and infrared light can actually penetrate through the skin into the subcutaneous tissue, where it has its own effects. There's two main types of sunscreens that most people are aware of. There are the mineral blockers, which we also call inorganic or physical, and these are going to be our zinc oxide and our titanium dioxides. These are going to sit on top of the skin and mostly reflect but absorb to a degree sunlight and thus protect the skin in that manner. They are immediately effective. They can be very thick and pasty and not terribly cosmetically appealing, but they're really inert and they're just sitting on the skin reflecting the light. They are deemed by the FDA to be generally regarded as safe and effective, and they are what we call broad spectrum, meaning that they are protecting you from UVA and UVB as well. And then additionally, there are some that are pigmentary grade, which means they're actually protecting you against visible light, which is important for sunspots and dyspigmentation. Chemical sunscreens are also called organic sunscreens, although I think that label is a little bit misleading since we generally think of the word organic and we think of chemical free. So I do call them chemical sunscreens versus mineral blockers. And these are going to include our common additives like oxybenzone and avobenzone and homosalates. And these are placed on the skin. You have to apply them about 15 minutes before sun exposure for them to be effective. They are being chemically altered by sunlight as they absorb them. And they individually are not broad spectrum, but can be pretty easily combined to get that broad spectrum coverage. They are light and silky, which makes them appealing. However, a lot of people do have trouble with allergies and sensitivities and having them cause a lot of irritation as well. The reason that I don't recommend using chemical blockers in general is because of the safety concerns. The FDA because of studies in like 2019 and 2020, demonstrated that these are avidly absorbed into the skin at levels that far, far, far exceed the FDA threshold for the need for more safety studies. And so we don't have evidence at this time that systemic absorption into our bloodstream is dangerous, although some animal models might argue that they are endocrine disruptors. Currently at this time, we don't have clear evidence for humans that they are harmful, but we also don't have any evidence of their safety. And so my preference is to use the mineral blockers, which we know are not absorbed into the body and sit on the skin and do a really great job. There are many other ingredients that are actually in sunscreen also that can improve both the SPF, the sun protective factor, but also add an antioxidant component to it as well. So there are natural extracts from a variety of plants, but then there's also specific antioxidants like vitamin C, E, ferulic acid. There's also green tea and grapeseed extracts that can be added that have photoprotective effects as well. Really, really, really importantly, if you're looking for full protection against visible light, you really want to look for a sunscreen that has iron oxides in it. And these are going to be pigmented, right? They have to be pigmented to be blocking visible light. But if you're sitting in front of a computer all day long with all that blue light in your face, or if you're sitting in front of a window, when you're getting a lot of light coming through, or just outside a ton and are very mindful about hyperpigmentation and brown spots, photo aging, you want that visible light protection, and you want to look for a sunscreen that has those iron oxides in it to give you that visible light protection. Also, just like you're checking your food, make sure you're checking your label when it comes to sunscreen, because there's a lot of other additives that might not be ideal, such as fragrances, some kind of older preservatives, stabilizers, emollients, and other additives that might not, necessarily be what you're looking for. I like referring people to the EWG, the Environmental Working Group. If you have questions about the different chemical additives and their safety profiles, I think it's a really great resource to take a look at so that you can learn more about those. In general, when we're looking at a sunscreen, the primary features that you're looking at are going to be the SPF broad spectrum, and then if it's water resistant or not. SPF is only a measure of redness and burning. It doesn't tell us if there's, benefits for antioxidants or DNA damage or photo aging or anything like that. It's just looking at, does it protect you from burning, which is of course an important marker for sun protection, but it's only one of them. So SPF, meaning that it's protecting from UVB burning. 15 will get you 93% effect, 30, 97, and then SPF of 50 will get you up to 98. So I'm usually going to recommend an SPF of 30 for most people, because the difference between that 30 to 50 in aesthetics and how it feels can be a pretty big jump, but you're only getting that 1% added benefit. So for most people, I feel a 30 is a good fit. You do, of course, want broad spectrum. That's going to be UVA and UVB coverage. I like also looking for that visible light coverage. If you're able to tolerate the pigment, the iron oxides in the sunscreen. Water resistant is effective for 40 minutes. Very water resistant is going to be effective for up to 80 minutes in water. So the benefits, of course, of sunscreen include that it's protecting you from photo aging, so sunlight-induced aging and skin cancers. And I'll have other videos where we can take a deeper dive into both photo aging and light-induced skin cancer as well. Like I mentioned before, there are a lot of concerns when it comes to sunscreen. The biggest concern, of course, being systemic absorption, in my opinion. We have concerns about environmental damage. It has the chemical blockers have been banned in Florida and Hawaii for concerns for damage to coral reefs. There's, of course, a lot of questions about, what concentration can cause the damage and whether there's enough exposure to actually cause the damage. But either way, it has been banned in those states. There are concerns about nanoparticles as well, and I think the jury is still out, because some studies show that nanoparticles of zinc and titanium are absorbed into the skin where they can cause damage, and other studies show that they are not meaningfully absorbed into the skin. So jury is still out, but luckily we have lots of options that are not nanoparticles if we choose to go that way. Some people have concerns about vitamin D. Our studies don't show that using sunscreen is going to reduce your vitamin D, although it doesn't really make any sense to me if you're using them in an effective way and blocking UVB. It should, but jury is still out a little bit. In general, I have a lot of thoughts about how much sunscreen you should be doing, and that's a talk for another day. But vitamin D is absolutely essential for health in general, and I don't believe that supplementing it is the same as getting adequate levels through sunlight exposure. There are associations between chemical sunscreens and a type of hair loss called lichen planopilaris, where there's an association. And then there's, of course, this concern of endocrine disruption based off of systemic absorption of the chemical blockers, which we can discuss at another time as well. So in general, recommendations, it's all about moderation. We want some sunlight exposure. It's great for our overall health, reduces cardiovascular disease, autoimmune, inflammatory disease, all of these things. But too much causes aging of the skin cancer. So it's all about balance. And of course, protecting the areas that are highest risk. So usually that's going to be your head and neck, chest, and areas that are chronically exposed. So I always recommend using a mineral sunscreen, usually an SPF of 30. If you're getting a lot of screen time, or if you have issues with hyperpigmentation, I recommend using a sunscreen with iron oxides for visible light coverage. And then, of course, we know that sunscreen is only one way to protect your skin from the sun. It is absolutely essential to eat a healthy diet, fruits and vegetables to get your polyphenols, your carotenoids, getting omega-3s from healthy, low mercury fish, flax and whatnot. And then if you do need a little extra support, there are some supplements that we know can improve specifically the way your skin tolerates sunlight, things like niacinamide and polypodium leucotomos, among others. So thanks so much for listening. I hope you continue to follow along.